Congressman Dave Loebsack from Iowa City made stops in Ottumwa and Albia on Tuesday. In Ottumwa, he met with Wapello County Sheriff Mark Miller to discuss local law enforcement.
Yeah, mostly it's on the crime front and doing what we can to make sure that folks here in rural America, in rural Iowa, have the tools that they need.
One of those topics discussed was civil forfeiture, or the seizure of assets to fund the war on drugs.
That's a big issue that is getting bipartisan scrutiny as to the constitutionality of it and how far we should be allowed to go with that kind of forfeiture.
He says one source of funding for drug task forces has been repeatedly cut since the early 2000s and the Bush administration.
The so-called burn jag funding is federal funding for the drug task forces. It's something I've been fighting for fully funding for since I've been in office.
Loebsack says those cuts have forced law enforcement to find other means to fund the war on drugs.
The drop in burn jag funding has led to an increased dependence on those forfeitures and the assets. That is not the way we ought to be funding drug task forces or anything in terms of law enforcement.
Funding local law enforcement's efforts to fight drugs remains a priority for the congressman.
And we haven't been as successful in recent years. There have been declines in the amount of funding coming from the federal government to local areas for exactly those issues, for those purposes. So that's a big thing, and everybody I talk to says we've got to keep funding that program.
For Ottumwa Radio News, I'm Nick Davis.